All right, Steve, you said you have a good one for me. Let's hear it.
Ever heard of Bukowski?
Bukowski? No,
Yeah.
is that like a singer?
No, he was the L.A. wino poet. He's a guy that delivered mail, but he was just this guy that wrote about being a alky reprobate down there in L.A. for years.
So he's a
Hollywood
writer.
section. Yeah, and he worked as a mailman for years. He's basically a factotum and a drunk and a poet, and he wrote some verse. And the point of all that is he changed my life because in '74 I was in Olympia, Washington. I was working in this furniture refinishing store with my buddy Nearly Normal Jimmy, and my buddy Moochie came in with his book, and it was Notes of a Dirty Old Man by Charles Bukowski. I'd never heard of him, and it was a series of columns he wrote in some L.A. Free Press newspaper in LA in the old hippie area in the 60s. So, and I liked it. I enjoyed them. They were good. And I appreciated someone who lived like I do was actually writing about it. I thought it was pretty nervy of him. But the part that struck me is I made a point of giving it to all my friends who were heavy readers and to a person, and this is up to like a dozen of them, they all had the same response, which is, I laughed my ass off at this. I loved it. And this is what you should do. Your stories are far crazier than this fucker. And from that point on, I've been trying to write fiction up to that point and had a lot of trouble with point of view, and I just couldn't stand it. But as soon as I started writing about my own nut job of a life, I found out that was my sweet spot. So, it's 1975. I'm living in San Mateo with Acid Mac and Nick the Nihilist. And if it seems like I give people names, I do. I give everybody a nickname. So we're living in San Mateo. I was working for the city of San Mateo on a water truck or whatever. So Nick the Nihilist and I, on the weekend, we go up near Sausalito, we buy some weed, and when we're coming back through San Francisco, we go to the City Lights bookstore, and it turns out Bukowski was in town to do a reading at a local auditorium, and there were 2 tickets left for that night. So I bought them, and go back to the San Mateo down in the peninsula, and Nick doesn't want to go, so I have to figure out amongst the people I know in the Bay Area, who has a car and wants to drive me to San Francisco that night, and also sit through a poetry reading with Bukowski. And the only guy that would do it was my buddy, I'll call him Devo. Now, Devo was the worst drug and alcohol abuser I ever met by a stretch, and believe me, I've known them and been one. This guy, you could open your medicine cabinet, any psychedelic, downer, upper you had, you could give him one of each of them, and he'd drink it down with some scotch. And the result wasn't pretty. He was always kind of like talking in tongues as a result. And he was kind of obnoxious. But the thing about Debo was he so abused himself for so long that every night he had the same hideous nightmare, but he could never remember what it was. And this had been going on for years.
God, that sounds like hell on earth.
Oh, well, so being altruistic Bay Area kind of guys, we decided to help him with it. So we had him stay with us for a while, and we'd spend all day, getting fucked up on something. It was the 70s, for Christ's sakes. And then at night, we'd have to stay up longer than Ebo. And he would sleep on the couch downstairs, and eventually we'd give him enough stuff that he passed out. So we knew we had about a half hour till the screaming started. And
the night terror screaming.
Believe me. And we would draw cards. And the guy that got the high card was the guy who got to jump on top of him. And what would
That's like to scare him more?
boy, this thing, he's passed on the couch, and it'd start, with tremors and everything, and then we hear, oh, and he'd start screaming and kicking his legs. It was like a fucking cartoon. So the guy who got the high card got to jump on his shoulders and the other two guys would hold his arms or his legs, and they like to slap him awake. I like to get hold of his ears, and you go, Devo, wake up! and when he did, you go, what is it? What are you dreaming about? What's going on, boy? And he could never remember that. We did that almost every night for a week straight.
Did he ever get close?
Absolutely not. So
Poor guy.
I knew he liked Bukowski because shortly after that, he'd gone into a Narconon rehab center in Palo Alto that was actually connected with Scientology. He'd gotten so much trouble with the law for the shit he did. So I knew he liked Bukowski because I'd given him a bunch of Bukowski books when he went in, so he'd have something to read, and he'd called me. So he was there on a 2-month stay, and he'd been there a month, which meant he got one night a week on his own because they trusted him. Huge mistake. And so I call him, and he comes and picks me up in his Buick. And I was hoping, I'd been in rehabilitating like that so many times, drying out and not rehabbing. And I was hoping he was going to stay sober, but he already had a giant thermos of rusty nails. I'm not a cocktail guy, but I think that's Scotch and Drambuie. And he's drinking those on the way up, and he's been saving his downers at the rehab center, and he'd taken those too. And I was prepared to grab the wheel if his eyes rolled back in his head, as they often did with Ebo, but his tolerance is pretty good. So we get to the show. We get to the reading where the last guy's through the door. We end up in the back row, and fortunately I get an aisle seat. And Bukowski comes sauntering out. He's up there on stage, and there's a refrigerator there full of beer for him to drink while he's giving his reading. And he was the most incredible looking person. He was a stocky guy with giant arms and little tiny hands on the end of them. And his face looked like a bag of ground round. It was purple and blue and pink. He'd had horrific acne as a kid. They used to drill into him with wooden drills. And so he was heavily scarred, and he had these little beady eyes. But the poetry is great. He was reading actually from my favorite book of his, which is Mockingbird, Wish Me Luck. And so he keeps downing beers. So I don't know, he's probably been up there 20, 25 minutes, and he stands up and he goes, I got to take a dump. And he walks off stage and, goes off towards, has a strange lurching walk. He goes off towards the bathroom, and Ebo turns to me and he goes, holy shit, this is our chance. We got to go meet Bukowski. And I said, fuck off, Devo. Actually, I might as well just call him Ebo. That's what we called him. He said, this is our chance. I said, let him do his business. And Ebo jumps up and he goes, no way. This is my chance to talk to Bukowski. And I was going to just sit there. And then I thought, shit, Ebo and Bukowski in the same room. I got to see this shit. So I follow him in, and miraculously enough, we were the only guys in there. The rest of these people had the decency to let this guy take a dump. So I hear this big commotion as I'm getting there, and Bukowski's gone in a stall and, closed and locked the door, and he's taking a shit in there. And Ebo is on the outside on the metal door banging, I want to hear about that 300-pound whore in New Orleans, you fucking fascist pig, Bukowski. Get your ass out of there. And I was going to intervene. I thought, yeah, I'll just take a piss. And later I was at the sink washing up, and I hear this, Ebo is carrying on, then I hear this bam. And Bukowski had finished up, and he took the door and smashed it into Ebo's face. Ebo fell to the tiles, and he wasn't knocked out, but he might as well have been. His nose is bleeding, and he's on the floor. And Bukowski comes over to the sink next to me, and I said, man, I didn't know those doors opened out like that. And he said, the moron didn't either. He said, is he a friend of yours? And I said, oh, yeah. I got him a night off from the rehab center to drive me here. And I remember Bukowski drives up and he goes, I get that a lot. And anyway, he goes up. Ebo keeps drinking. Ibu passes out. And Bukowski does the rest of his show. It's just, he even did The Last Days of the Suicide Kid, my all-time favorite Bukowski poem. I used to know that by heart. Anyway, he finishes up. He comes off the stage, and he starts walking up the aisle where I am. And, everybody's shaking his hand and slapping on his back. And I stand up, and he's about as far away as you are, and Ebo gets the nightmare. So he's there in his chair, and it's this packed auditorium, and and he's doing all this shit.
Because he was passed out from drugs?
No, but he's passed out from drinking and drugs, but he's having his nightmare. And, he's kicking his legs, and Bukowski looked over, and he pulls me close to him, and he says, "Hey, when your buddy wakes up, tell him we miss him in L.A."